and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be discussing how to select and integrate quotes when writing your literature or literary essays. Now I have made a whole video on literature essays, but I'm going to focus specifically on this skill with regard to literature essays because it is one of those make it or break it skills. If you're able to integrate your quotes, you have a much better chance of achieving within the next simple band. So first we need to understand, why am I expected to quote? And if you go back to that literature essay video, that skills video that I made, I think it was about 2 years ago now, you can actually understand that the entire point of a literature essay is to prove an argument. And so if you're going to provide a quote from the text, from the literature that you're actually discussing, you are going to be emphasizing your argument and reinforcing your argument and making your argument more credible. And so that's why it is really important to quote, and it is an expectation. Your marker is looking to see that you have read the text thoroughly and that you've critically analyzed it and that you've engaged with it. We don't want to see an essay where it doesn't even look like you've read the text or that you've made the effort to actually go and study some of the important parts of it. So my advice would be to aim for 2 quotes per body paragraph. So if you're an IAB student, you are typically going to be writing an essay with 3 body paragraphs, which means you need around 6 quotes in your essay. If you're a DBA student, maybe you're writing 2 body paragraphs, and so therefore you need around 4 quotes. Now the minimum I would say is 1 quote per paragraph, but if you can do 2, then it's so much better. So before the exam, you need to ensure that you are studying the correct quotes, and this comes into this preparation aspect of it. Remember, you can't just show up, you sort of know the play, and then you're going to make up the quotes on the spot. The quotes have to be legitimate, and trust me, your teacher will know because they have read the text many times. So you need to study quotes which are suitable to prove a variety of themes and characters. So you don't want to go and study a quote that is very obscure, that only relates to one particular theme or one particular character, because then you're going to land up studying a whole bunch of quotes, maybe like 50 quotes, which is obviously too difficult to study all of them accurately. So you need to ensure that you are selecting your quotes very carefully. So you want to select a quote that tells you a lot about a character, but also tells you a lot about a theme. And in that way, that quote is a good investment of your time to study. You must use quotes between 5 to 7 words. You don't want to go learn an entire paragraph off by heart. And some teachers don't like when you quote just 1 word. Some teachers don't mind it, but other teachers prefer if you quote something of substance. So my suggestion would be don't just quote 1 word, because there are those markers who don't like that. Rather quote something of substance. And what I mean by that is, it mustn't be a quote that just uses normal everyday language, the way that you would describe something, right? Because that could just be a description that you can just use in your explanation. It must be a quote that is really meaningful, that has very strong diction, that tells you a lot about that character or that theme in a very particular way. The next thing is to study quotes with limited pronouns and or obvious tenses to avoid overusing square brackets. So I think there is a little bit of a tendency, once students learn about square brackets, that they use them all the time, right? So square brackets are when you want to slightly adjust a quote and you want to make it a different tense, or you want to adjust the pronoun so it flows in the sentence and it's integrated. But if you use too many of those, it actually defeats the whole point of using a quote, because you're using more of your own words than the quote itself. So you need to be very careful in the selection of quotes. And this slide is basically just talking about that selection of quotes to ensure that you're not studying quotes that have a whole bunch of pronouns and a whole bunch of references to the past tense, because it's going to be more difficult to integrate that into your argument or into your paragraph. So understanding what quotes to learn, that's the first step. And some people like to write out these quotes on a list, which I think is a really good idea. Some people like to highlight it in their book so they can see the context that it's in. Either one works, as long as you know that you have a list of, let's say, like 10 to 20 quotes in your head when you go into that exam. Remember as well, and it's something I'm going to talk about, and I do talk about this in the literature videos, is that your quotes, even though they're said by a particular character, it doesn't always have to prove something about that character. So character A can say something about character B, and you can use that quote to elucidate your argument about character B. Also remember that quotes are not necessarily said. Obviously in a play it's all said, it's all dialogue, but in a novel it can just be a description. It doesn't actually have to be the words that someone says. So moving on to actually integrating your quotes. So you need to ensure that this is done really skillfully. You don't want to see in an essay when you're marking it, and you don't want to write it, this quote shows, or I've seen a lot of essays where people just put the quote as a sentence and then they say, this indicates that. No, definitely not. We do not want to see that. We want to see the quotes being a part of that paragraph, a part of what you're saying. So you need to ask yourself, is my selected quote relevant to the point of my paragraph? Is this quote actually doing what it's intended to do in terms of proving my argument, or am I just using a quote for the sake of using a quote? Obviously, we want to ensure that this quote is relevant, that it proves a specific point. And that's why I said you should try and find quotes related to themes and characters and define them in your head. This proves this about this character, this proves this about this theme. Because in the essay topics are usually centered around themes and characters, or themes or characters. So make sure that you select a quote that is really important to relaying that particular point, that it is relevant to what you're saying, and that it's a quote of substance. And then the big question, if I read this sentence aloud, would it be obvious that there was a quote from the play that made an appearance in the sentence? This is an important question regarding the extent to which your quote is integrated. So an integrated quote means that you can read it as part of the sentence, and if I read it aloud to someone, they wouldn't even know it was a quote because they wouldn't be able to see the inverted commas. So make sure that when you are writing your quote in there, that you have integrated it in such a way that you can just read it aloud and it would flow smoothly, right? So it obviously still has to be a quote of substance, and maybe the language would give it away that this is a quote, but the sentence must flow. I don't want to see he said this or this shows that. It must be a part of the sentence. I hope that was helpful. I'll see you in the next video.